The Fantastic Four occupies a weird space in Marvel's history. I believe at one point they were one of the company's big pillars, but that seemed to wane as time went on, and as far as I've been alive, which is not that long. In my generation, the Fantastic Four were never really that popular, likely because they don't have a lot of notable media outside of the comics. Like Cosmonaut says, media outside of comics, usually movies, will shape public perception. Iron Man in my lifetime was always a big pillar in Marvel, and it wasn't until a while ago I found out that he was actually a B to C list hero until the MCU. Nobody cared about DC's catalog, except Batman, because a lot of DC movies kinda sucked. Until Superman, of course. Now everyone loves Superman. By the way, you should watch my Superman video, it's really good. And the Fantastic Four have suffered from their movie catalog, but are slowly but surely coming back into style thanks to First Steps, Marvel Rivals, that one Johnny Storm video, and a lot of funny memes. But are these movies really as weak as people say? Or is there something here that people are overlooking? Where did these movies fail in getting people to love the Fantastic Four, and what will First Steps do to fix those problems? As some of you have noticed, I've been breaking the shackles of being an Anituber, at least I think I am, as my passing interest in comic books has grown more and more. I've been dipping my toes into a lot of different franchises, with Fantastic Four being my next victim. First Steps seems to be Marvel's big move to make people like the Fantastic Four again. So, let's answer those questions. Are these movies really as bad as people will lead you to believe? Can First Steps save this superhero team and the MCU's fleeting reputation? Let's find out as we watch and review every Fantastic Four movie, which isn't that hard because there's only 4 of them. Well, 4-ish. More on that later. So what made me really interested in this film was, I saw a lot of funny clips online. So this movie doesn't seem unanimously hated. Some people do seem to like it, while others lump it in with the lesser Marvel films. But I don't know, I kept seeing clips and it seemed like a good time. And it was. Fantastic Four 2005 is not like groundbreaking cinema. It's not perfect. It's just a fun little watch. It's goofy and silly, just how I like it. Also, since I'm not a proper Fantastic Four fan, this movie does kind of serve as my introduction to the overall franchise, so make of that what you will. The best thing this movie has going for it are the character interactions and casting. I really love the dynamic between the four. I don't know how comic accurate any of this is, but it's very good. Wait, give me a second.
Ioan Gruffudd.
Okay, so Ioan Gruffudd is to this day my top candidate for Reed Richards. I just think he exudes like that sort of brainy, but also like slightly like in his own head, narcissistic kind of vibe that I assume Reed is supposed to give. Chris Evans oozes that fuckboy charm Johnny is supposed to have. Michael Chiklis' Thing captures very well his struggle of being this big rocky monster, as this is something this film explores decently well. Jessica Alba has a lot of sass, which makes her very entertaining, and all of them come together to feel like a proper family. I was struggling to see why this was considered one of the weaker superhero movies, and after hearing some reviews, like, I kind of get it, you know, it's a bit dated, it's very much an early 2000s film, which is kind of the charm in my opinion, but that does come with some baggage like the over-sexualization of Jessica Alba, which is not good. And this is at a time where superhero movies were a little afraid to embrace their comic bookier roots in fear of alienating general audiences. I genuinely forgot they were living in the Baxter Building. I know that sounds stupid, but it's like, okay, this is what it looks like in the comics, this is what it looks like in the new movie, this is what it looks like in Marvel Rivals, and this is what it looks like in these movies. Like, what the fuck? The movie, in my opinion, was still very entertaining until the last act, where that was definitely the weakest part, in my opinion. You see, most of this movie was very, I guess, like slice of life-esque. It wasn't super plot-focused as it was just about the four adjusting to their new lives as they are now celebrities. The last act of the film transitions into a more sort of typical superhero movie finale, which is where I think it gets less interesting. Most of the dumb stuff in this movie is in this third act, like the Thing being so easily persuaded by Victor in favor of his literal best friend, and Johnny being talked down to by Sue and maybe realizing that the fame and fortune is all superficial, only to not really come back to that idea again. But the biggest fumble of all is Doctor Doom. So, I was actually very surprised to see Doctor Doom in this movie, which is weird because, yeah, he's the main villain of Fantastic Four, so why was I so surprised? Well, It's because this movie's Doctor Doom is literally almost never talked about. Even when I went out to seek miscellaneous clips of this film, I still didn't know he was gonna be here. He doesn't even really show up in many of the posters, and that's probably because this version of Doctor Doom is pretty lame. Now, this other superhero YouTuber, Brown Table, pointed this out in his review, but yeah, Victor Von Doom is pretty much just Norman Osborn from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. He's rich, and then he gets fucked over by his own company, and then he goes nuts. But Norman was like way cooler. I'm willing to bet Doctor Doom is a far more interesting character in the comics, or maybe other media for that matter. At least he wears the costume right, kinda? Ooh, okay, he's wearing the mask. Wait, let's see the fit, You're kind of there, you're kind of not. I still like this movie, though. I think the film was at its strongest when it was just a group of people trying to adjust to their new lives as freaks. When it shifted back into being a typical superhero movie, it fell a bit flatter for me. But whatever flaws the movie might have, the most important thing it got right was getting me sold on the dynamic of the Fantastic Four, which seems to be a core appeal of the franchise, so I think that's a very commendable thing. I give it a 6 out of 10. It's pretty fun. I like it. It may have not been the best movie, but it was fun enough to get a sequel, which is where we jump into The Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer is a much bigger movie in scope compared to the first one, and I've heard some people say it's a step up in quality. They actually prefer this movie to the first. Personally, I think they're about the same in quality. I can't really decide which one is definitively better, but I can recognize there are some things that this movie does better than its predecessor. This is where the movies got a little more comfortable embracing those sort of sci-fi cosmic elements. Like the Fantastic Car is here, and it looks pretty good. Galactus is in this movie, and while we don't get to see him, we do get to see a silhouette of him abstracted by all the clouds and fire. Silver Surfer looks pretty much like how he should. Every other character or set piece has some strange alterations, but not Silver Surfer. He looks exactly like how he would if he just leapt off the page, which, I mean, to be fair, he does have a pretty simple design, but it's still 100% comic accurate, I think. It still doesn't go all the way in comic booky shenanigans, but, you know, baby steps. I also like that this movie still feels primarily character-driven. One key thing Brown Table pointed out in his video is that nowadays, superhero movies are kind of just about the point A to point B journey of the character, where we rarely get to see their life outside of being a superhero. Back then, superhero movies weren't that comfortable being superhero movies, so they kind of played out like dramas that happen to have superheroes in them, which is ironic because that basically is kind of what a superhero story is, which is something I really appreciate about these movies that feels weirdly absent in things like the MCU. We see that the family is struggling with their lives as now they're basically celebrities. Reed and Sue want to move out and have a private life because every time they try to have their wedding, some superhero bullshit always interferes. Johnny is learning to grow up and start taking more responsibility. There is actually some deeper contemplation about this giant apocalyptic event, as this is something that genuinely affects our characters. Sure, our heroes are still gonna go up against the big bad, but you actually get to see some heart-to-heart between Johnny and Ben.
Was that it's just nice to have somebody.
Well, you got me, pal.
The movie, however, still suffers from some of the same problems the first one did. Doctor Doom is still kind of lame. There are some visual improvements here. I like that they let his cape flow, just like how it should, and his mask looks slightly better. It's not a big difference, but there's enough here to make him a little bit more intimidating in costume. He gets like an insane kill here too. Like, this general guy has been such a complete douchebag to the rest of the Fantastic Four, and he just dies in the most like brutal way possible, bro. Like, Jesus Christ. Too bad this Doctor Doom goes out like a chump. Marvel's greatest antagonist gets defeated by a steel beam. Yeah, there's more Jessica Alba fan service, which is again not very tasteful, and I don't know if it was the budget not allowing this because we already had Silver Surfer and all these other effects, but man, it would have been so cool to actually see Galactus in his full glory instead of just like a glance of his figure, or I guess what he could look like. Also, this scene really confuses me.
It was nothing compared to what I did at my bachelorette party. Talk about wild.
What the fuck? Still a fun watch nonetheless. I'm gonna give it a, yeah, like a 6 out of 10, same as the first movie. So, I think these films had a pretty decent foundation to tell some great stories, but were just held back by it being a bit shy to fully embrace those more comic book elements, and the fact that their Doctor Doom is just not compelling enough to keep it going. But as far as the tone is concerned, this is pretty much what the Fantastic Four could be like on the big screen. I feel like if this movie series went on for a bit longer, maybe it would have been able to go even deeper, get weirder, and introduce more characters. Or so I've heard. Yeah, apparently that was kind of the plan. There was going to be a third or maybe fourth movie that would introduce characters like Black Panther, for example. But since Rise of the Silver Surfer failed to meet expectations, we're just left with the two films, which honestly, I think is kind of for the better. I love the casting of these films, and they got the dynamic and tone right for me. But as far as the vision of the Fantastic Four as a team and as a mythos goes, I still think you can do a lot better, and it wouldn't hurt to go for a reboot. Or at least you think it wouldn't hurt. Here it is, the moment you've all been waiting for. The best Fantastic Four movie with one of the best endings of all time.
Fantastic.
Say that again?
Alright, let's talk about this. If the first two Fantastic Four movies are sort of like the average early 2000s superhero movie with all that datedness and unwilling to embrace those comic book elements, then Fan Four Stick is definitely the average 2010 superhero movies, when comic book movies try to look darker and more mature and have dark lighting and shadows everywhere, going for a sort of Amazing Spider-Man kind of vibe. Most people said this trend traces back to The Dark Knight, but Spider-Man was my first thought, probably because they're both Marvel. Now, from the get-go, you can already see problems with this film. I mean, just look at it. The casting is buns. Reed doesn't look like Reed. Johnny doesn't look like Johnny.
Hey, no racial. Donald Trump.
Ben doesn't really look like Ben, but Thing looks like Thing, except Thing doesn't have any pants. Why is he naked? Sue looks like Sue, I guess, but she clearly doesn't want to be in this film. And all of them aren't even wearing superhero costumes. They're just wearing these, like, generic bodysuits. And they all come together to not feel like a family whatsoever. They just feel like coworkers. Now, I'm not gonna come in with a crazy take. This movie's pretty bad. But it's not really that bad for most of its runtime. Like, for about an hour into the film, there's nothing really, like, that egregious about it. There were some really strange choices throughout the film, like having the "it's clobbering" timeline come from when Ben used to get bullied by his older brother, I guess. And look at that! Victor is a gamer in this movie. That's fun. Yeah, as a Fantastic Four film, this is definitely as bad as it gets, but just as a regular film, you can kind of do a lot worse in that hour. It was more so a nothing burger than anything else. Not much was really happening, none of the characters had really strong dynamics going on, but there was some setup for semi-interesting things. Johnny Storm and his dad are having conflict over the decisions he's been making since he feels Johnny has been wasting his potential. Reed and Sue just have like the slightest bits of romantic chemistry in this film, which never goes anywhere. And there is some endearment to be had with Reed and Ben's relationship, even though there's not much there. I don't know, maybe I just have a soft spot for like the nerd and punk guy dynamic. And apparently Victor Von Doom is a colleague amongst our main heroes. That's interesting. But here's where the movie falls apart. So I'm gonna exaggerate a little to get my point across. Watch the movie for yourself if you actually care that much about the timestamps. But basically, the movie is an hour and 40 minutes. Now, roughly an hour in, they just got their powers. The whole movie before then was just spent setting up them getting their powers. And now, just now, did they become, like, superpowered freaks. So that made me think, okay, so what the fuck are they gonna do for the next 40 minutes? Because we don't really have like that much time left. So you keep watching, right? Now we delve into some big problems. So Reed just leaves his best friend behind, and the only explanation this film gives us is that Reed was just scared, I guess. Sure, I guess, but I don't know. Reed has just been kind of like the worst friend ever. It was his idea to use this big machine to travel dimensions with his friends without telling any of the supervisors, and he decides to just drag Ben into this in the middle of the night. And when they get there, he wants to keep exploring, even though it's clearly dangerous and Ben clearly wants to go back home, which gets Victor fucking killed, quote unquote, and then it turns all of his friends into freaks. And after all this, he just bails on them? Okay, what? Okay, so I guess now they're pawns of the government because they're, I mean, very dangerous because of their powers. Reed's in Panama now? Okay. Ooh, but plot twist, Victor comes back and he's evil now. Ooh. And his costume still fucking sucks. This is the worst one I've seen so far. I don't know what I'm looking at. And he also kills Johnny and Sue's dad in this really, probably one of the most mid-death scenes I've ever seen. Yeah, that whole conflict between Johnny and his dad doesn't really get resolved all too much. His final words are just,
Look after each other.
look, I'm not expecting, like, Shakespeare, but, like, it's like you didn't even try. Okay, that was rocky. Now, what is interesting, though, is the dynamics at play in the final battle. You see, during this film, Reed, Johnny, and Victor actually become friends somewhat. They share a drink together, they have a laugh, they talk about their dreams, and it was that pursuit of success that led to Victor's doom. Sure, they were a little bit antagonistic towards each other, but the camaraderie was still there towards the end of the first half. So in this final battle, there's more of an emotional weight behind it compared to the other films, as now the four have to fight what was once their friend and, oh, they just kill him. And they don't really care all too much, I guess. Well, now that they've successfully murdered their former coworker, Reed now has the fantastic idea to come up with a team name in order to commemorate his stupid fucking idea that got them all in this mess. Especially Ben, the Fantastic Four, which is a brilliant name because this movie isn't getting any higher than a 4 out of 10. I'm leaning more towards 3 though, this movie fucking sucked. If the first Fantastic Four movies were a duology of films that had some potential but ultimately missed the mark in crucial areas to make them the definitive on-screen interpretations, then Fan 4 Stick just never had a chance. The tone and vision isn't even remotely appropriate for Fantastic Four. From what I know, the director isn't even really a Fantastic Four fan and apparently wanted to make a more body horror-esque film, which might have been even worse than the final product. From what I'm seeing, this movie sucked and was always going to suck. If more great Fantastic Four movies come out, this will probably be remembered as that weird one that just kinda came out in 2015. Well, I guess that's all of them. Except nope, there is one more. Some of you Fantastic Four fans in the audience may know what I'm referring to, but others may not. So did you know, this is not the first Fantastic Four movie. Before, there was another that you probably didn't watch because it was never meant to be shown. Quite the long intro. So a bit of background on this film, but it was never meant to come out. That's why I said 4-ish. So essentially, Constantine Films actually owned the rights to Fantastic Four at the time, and they signed an agreement that a Fantastic Four movie had to be made every, I want to say 10 years or something like that, or else the rights would go back to Marvel. This movie was essentially made to just keep the IP, which is why the movie is pretty cheaply made and was never shown. It seems that's somewhat the case for a lot of Fantastic Four movies, where even though 20th Century Studios would go on to own the license, they would still do the thing of, yeah, just put out a Fantastic Four movie, we gotta keep the license. That's still pretty shitty for the cast and crew who weren't even aware of any of this. Nonetheless, it was still clearly a passion project made as a faithful adaptation of the original comics, and you can tell. The cast and crew actually grew to be pretty big fans of the Fantastic Four and started doing research during production. All the suits and designs are pretty spot on, if not a little cheap looking. Dr. Doom actually has his costume and the accent. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is the best on-screen Dr. Doom we've seen so far. He's entertaining to watch, and they actually give him and Reed a bit more of a grounded dynamic, especially by the end. The general events of the story, from my knowledge, seem to be very faithful, especially... Wait, why are Johnny and Sue like kids? Oh, okay, maybe this takes place in a time where Sue and Reed are married and they decided to name their kids after...
He's dreamy. You're gross.
Oh, what the fuck? Yeah, so apparently this is a real thing in the comics. Reed met Sue when he was in college and she was like... 12. I did not know Reed and Sue's age gap was this big, and I think this might have been retconned, but we still got the receipts, pal. You know how I said before that a problem with the other films was that they're not embracing their comic roots? You know, I think the inverse can be true as well. I'm not a believer that comic accuracy is like this sacred thing, because sometimes Comics can be stupid, and I'm a believer that sometimes comic things should just be left behind and forgotten about. Certain things should just not be adapted. But anywho, the casting seems pretty perfect. Ben Grimm in this film looks almost exactly like how he does in the comics, and the same goes for the rest of the cast. Johnny Storm is much more, I guess, chill in this movie. He's definitely a hothead, but he's still a sweet kid in the end, compared to Chris Evans' take on Johnny, which is more of a fuckboy. And everyone else looks and acts how they should. This, by and large, is the most comic-accurate Fantastic Four movie, and, definitely the weirdest one. I was trying to do some mild research for this video, but was this subplot ever in the comics? Can someone let me know, please? And since this movie was just made to further extend the ownership of the Fantastic Four IP, it was made on a very low budget. You know, if you couldn't already tell. There's a lot of cut corners, and honestly, this film looks more like a 90s commercial than anything else. Johnny can't fully go flame on until the last act of the film. There's one scene where the four are about to beat up their guards, and this is how it plays out. If you want to watch this movie, I also recommend subtitles, because the audio isn't the best either. What? What was that? Definitely the worst thing you can say about this movie, it's very limited budget. And I think it's just a little too weird sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. But I did find myself enjoying it either way. It's a very standard Fantastic Four origin, but I mean, it is the first one, so maybe we should, you know, cut it some slack. And is by far the most faithful adaptation of the Fantastic Four we're probably ever gonna get. That's probably the best thing I can say about this film, is that it was made by people who actually love the source material, which is somewhat rare.
What is Thor the god of?
Hammers?
For the love this movie was made with and how dirty it was done at the time, I think it deserves at least a 5.5 out of 10. Maybe 6. I wouldn't really go that much higher. So it's about like an average movie, I'd say. Sure, the crew got done dirty at the time, but nowadays it's pretty easy to find it on YouTube or something. So if you're a Fantastic Four completionist or just want to kill an afternoon, I'd say go right ahead. So I've generally given some positive reviews, except for you, but even the better ones never really got any higher than a 6 out of 10. And all these films were either critical, financial flops, or just never saw the light of day. So what was causing the Fantastic Four to fail so hard in movies? A lot of other YouTubers have tried to answer this question as well, and I don't think it's a big secret as to why. Aside from studios just not seeming to have enough faith in the Fantastic Four property, it just seems to be a mix of these movies failing as both Fantastic Four films and regular films, but more so Fantastic Four films. So here's the big issue I've noticed. I think most of these movies, whether they just be bad or okay, just aren't showing me what makes this superhero team different from others. Now, I have very limited knowledge on the Fantastic Four as a whole, but through my journey making this video, I've picked up some knowledge along the way. So if I were to tell you what makes the Fantastic Four seem cool compared to other hero teams, it would be the hard sci-fi cosmic elements. These guys are always going to space and fighting aliens and shit and coming into contact with like black holes and meteors and like the negative zone. I don't know what that is, but it sounds rad. That's what makes them cool. And that's what I think the Fantastic Four movies could be focusing on. The 1994 movie was very faithful to the ideas of Fantastic Four, but was held back by its low budget and being the first of its kind, meaning it couldn't delve too far into the sci-fi elements for that specific film. Tim Story's Fantastic Four duology also had to serve as an origin story for a general audience, and was a bit hesitant to dive headfirst into those hard sci-fi elements, which I still find crazy. Like, do executives think kids hate sci-fi? Kids love sci-fi. Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises of all time, and you're telling me they'd find this too weird, too alienating for a general audience? If kids can like Darth Vader, they can like Doctor Doom, I promise you. And Fantastic Four 2015, well, it just kind of sucked. But my point is, the movies don't necessarily have to be comic accurate. They just need to show us what makes them different, what makes them unique, and how you can tell great stories with this team. And we finally have it. Here is our answer. Fantastic Four First Steps is finally out, and yes, it's good.
Hey people! Who's hungry for something good?
This movie succeeds where the other films suffered and comes out to be, by and large, the most solid Fantastic Four film. First off, the casting. Okay, I think the casting choices were a little bit hard to digest at first. They're not bad, they're just not like people's first choice for these characters, particularly Johnny. I wasn't sure if Joseph Quinn had the aura necessary to be Human Torch, but after seeing the film, he's a very good balance of his jokey side, his woman-loving side, and his heroic side, where they wanted to stray away from going full-on womanizer like Chris Evans, and I think it paid off. Sue Storm gets a lot of attention in this film, and not to spoil it, but she's probably the most important member of the Fantastic Four for this film. The Thing doesn't get as much to do, but despite that, he's still one of my favorite depictions of the character, especially with his brief interactions with Johnny Storm. And since they've been a team for 4 years already, it's nice to see people love and respect The Thing. I mean, you just gotta love it, he's come a long way. Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards is... I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't completely sold on his performance as Reed. I feel like Pedro didn't bleed into the role as naturally as his predecessors, at least in the beginning. When Reed was talking in smart science babble, it felt somewhat forced. Part of me felt like it was maybe a script thing, but part of me also felt like I would have liked it more if Ioan Gruffudd were saying these lines instead. But it wasn't bad at all. By the second half, I felt like he had properly got into his role, but I also just feel like Reed Richards in general doesn't do a whole lot in this movie. I mean, he's obviously like a key member, but he doesn't have like a standout moment or quality the way the other members do. Also, big issue, Reed does not stretch enough in this movie. He only stretches when he's like jumping around, doing parkour, and the stretching itself is so mild. He only stretches his arms like maybe a few feet or something, right? He doesn't really get to stretch his limbs silly like this, or even like this. Severely hurts the film. I'm gonna have to bump this movie down by 80 points. Marvel, do better. And when they all come together, they are a family. This is the most family-feeling depiction of the four on the big screen. You see them have dinner together. They announce Sue's pregnancy together. You see bits and pieces of them just living their lives in the Baxter building. You see Herbie. Herbie's so fucking cute. All my homies love Herbie. Now I'm gonna talk about probably my favorite part of the film, the aesthetic. Now, for some reason, this sort of visual flair was very fitting for this movie in my eyes, but I couldn't tell why. But after seeing how big of a deal sci-fi is in this superhero team, the retro-futurism aesthetic was probably the best possible choice for this film, especially in sort of like an alternate universe, where you can build this world from scratch. You watch most other Marvel films, aside from some exceptions, they're all so flat. They look so boring, so grayed out. This is a superhero movie. Where's all the color? And then you watch this film and you're like, wow, this movie's so fun. Look at the editing. It looks like the Jetsons. Look at this place. Look at these buildings. And if that's not enough, this movie gives us the one big thing that was severely lacking from every film before. These dudes, they go to space! They're fighting the Silver Surfer through space. They're going to different planets. They're escaping black holes like in the comics. Yes, this is what I needed. While the aesthetics primarily serve as just the cherry on top, I'm just happy that superhero movies can look like fucking superhero movies again. You know what I'm saying? And not just like that. The stakes actually feel more grounded, which is something that feels carried over from Rise of Silver Surfer. Well, maybe not intentionally, but I felt it. The world is about to end, and it actually feels like it. It feels like there's this great sense of impending doom as our heroes desperately try to think of something, anything to save their world. And you get Galactus in his full glory. He looks great. Well, I mean, okay, I feel like his colors could be a bit brighter. I'm still not a fan of the desaturated, like, MCU look. But what works for him is that he looks so alien compared to everything else, so yes, this is still Galactus, and he still is a very good foil to the Fantastic Four. This movie is just mad solid. It isn't perfect. I'm pretty sure there's quite a few bits of cut content on, like, wow, some of the best scenes in the trailer. I don't know why they would do that. That's fucked up. But the final product is still very good. It is easily the best Fantastic Four movie, and I don't know where this ranks in the MCU, but I feel like this belongs in the higher tiers of the Marvel films. And most importantly, like what happened with Superman for DC, the Fantastic Four are cool again. Let's go. I'm gonna give this movie the franchise's very first 8 out of 10. I was thinking either high 7 or low 8, but just for now, I'm gonna lean towards 8. What's cool about doing these videos isn't just watching a bunch of movies only to rank them at the end, although that is obligatory in these videos. It's actually quite tempting. Okay, let's just speedrun it real quick. In last place, we have Fantastic Four 2015, or Fan Four Stick. This movie fails as both a Fantastic Four film and a regular film. Whatever way you watch it, you're probably not gonna like it. Lame characters, lame visuals, lame costumes, dumb writing, but the ending is really funny. Not good, just really funny. In fourth place, we have the unreleased Fantastic Four 1994. A lot of fours. The best this movie has going for it is its respect for the original source material and doing the best with a bad hand. In general, it's just an average to okay movie that can get weird in not always the best ways. I can't really see why people would watch this movie if they weren't already a Fantastic Four fan just trying to watch every movie, but it was a good effort. Coming in at third place, we have Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer. I have quite a soft spot for these movies, I'm not gonna lie. They may be dated, and maybe are not the most comic book accurate, but I just really like the way they're written. These movies are carried head and shoulders by the chemistry of the cast members. Without that charisma, these movies would not be as fun. I said before that Rise of Silver Surfer and the first movie are about similar, but just now, I made the decision to put one over the other, so I'm gonna say at second place, I'm actually gonna put Fantastic Four 2005, simply because I just like the more grounded story this film had, and it being my first introduction to the team, I have quite an attachment to it. Also, Ioan Gruffudd is still the best Reed Richards. And at number 1, to nobody's surprise, is Fantastic Four First Steps. I watched this movie a few days ago in the time of this recording, and it is the most solid. So maybe other movies do certain things better, maybe, possibly, but this is the most well-rounded movie. It has the space elements I'm looking for, every character is likable, Sue Storm is given more justice here than any other film before, it looks the prettiest, and has the least amount of issues. Okay, where was I? Right. What's cool about doing these kind of videos isn't just watching a bunch of movies just to give them a ranking at the end. It's also learning more along the way. Going into these movies without any knowledge is fun because even though they're not the most faithful or comic accurate, you still learn a thing or two along the way. You're seeing a piece of history unfold. You're seeing the highs and the lows until you reach the gold at the end. And you learn more about a subject that before you didn't know anything about. And that's what makes this video format so cathartic. So what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I like the Fantastic Four. They're pretty cool.